All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RenoFam podcast. My name is Joey, and this podcast is designed to help equip parents to be the spiritual leaders of their home. But this podcast comes with a massive disclaimer that I am no expert in parenting. I just want to get better at it. So you probably feel the same. So let's learn together. The RenoFam podcast is a ministry of Renovation Church in Hampstead, North Carolina. And so today on the podcast, we have my friend Dr. George Gates. Dr. Gates is a licensed professional counselor and a national board certified counselor, and also faith-based. He earned his doctorate from Boston University and his master's degree in clinical psychology from Marshall University. He has undergone extensive training in cognitive behavioral psychotherapy model. I have to slow down on that one. That's a lot. Dr. Gates is the founder of Gateway Psychological Services in Wilmington. He is the husband to his amazing wife, Carol, of 35 years, a father and a grandfather. He is also, ladies and gentlemen, the lover of Tommy Bahama shirts. And there we are right there. And I've heard of some research I did that you speak several languages as well. But there's a reason for that. So that no matter what country you're in, you and your buddies can shut down an all-you-can-eat restaurant. Is there any truth to shutting down an all-you-can-eat restaurant?
Well, yes. I mean, I could go back to early days in college. And,
yeah. What's your favorite shut-it-down story?
Well, there were four of us who went to a Pizza Hut. This was probably 1969 or 1970.
Okay, yeah.
Some of us were under 20 years old then. And they had all the pizza you could eat at this Pizza Hut for $1.25.
Ooh.
And so our table of four ate 100 pieces of pizza.
Table of four. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so we ate probably, well, what is that?
25 each? I mean.
Yeah, yeah. It was like 3 pizzas or 4 pizzas a piece. But that's, that's.
Yeah, it's college. That's college fit, right?
It is. And they didn't tell us to not come back, so we did come back later, but we didn't try to surpass that. Yeah.
Those eating contest things, I had a friend that I used to work out with sometimes, and he wouldn't even prep himself. Like if he went into a restaurant and there was one, he saw it on the wall, he's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that right now. And he would crush it. Like most people are planning it out, not him. He could just go after it. So, all right, so Dr. Gates, we have a little bit of fun, but I heard also that your favorite drink is Diet Pepsi. Is that true?
Sure.
You're a big fan. All right, so we have some Diet Pepsi here for you. Jordan, can you bring in some Diet Pepsi? I think Jordan is out there standing by. I got to make sure. Yeah, come on in, Jordan. I got to make sure that any guest of mine has the beverage of choice right there. So this is yours.
Great.
Nice cold mug. There we go. Yeah, let's go ahead and pour one up. Jordan's service. If you're watching on YouTube, you can now see Jordan's elbow and arm. But very good, very good. So yeah, I heard it was Diet Pepsi was your thing. So
absolutely,
there you go. So that's yours.
Well, thank you,
Jordan. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate you coming in and helping us out.
The service.
Yeah. Need some more? We'll grab it for you. So, but so much. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. Excited to be talking about parenting in the pandemic with you. But before we go any further, I have something else for you. And I was thinking through a couple things that I love about you. Diet Pepsi. I was a big Pepsi fan growing up.
Yeah.
And you also are a lover of Vans shoes.
Yes.
Right? Is that true?
Yes.
So what do you have on now?
Vans.
Oh, the Blues on Blues.
Yeah.
The classics, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I heard of this. And I actually have a pair, and I want you to tell me what you think of these right here because you're a fan of Pepsi. These are this is what we found. Have you seen these yet?
No.
These are the Pepsi colored red, white, blue.
Oh my goodness.
So these are yours right here.
Whoa.
So we got those for you as a thank you for
thanks. All right.
Being on the podcast
I
with us.
will wear those with great pride. Thank
you. There you go. You can wear them to your group tonight. Show up. Check these out. But well, good. We're so glad to have you with us. And just before we go any further, let's talk a little bit. How did you get started in counseling? Kind of what was that point in your life where you were like, this is what I want to do, and what was that process like for you?
Sure. There was a sense that I wanted to was probably in college that I sensed that I could talk to people and I could be of some assistance to people just through being friends and talking with them. And then that went on into seminary, and into the second year of seminary, it hit me in a class one day when the professor said, "It just may be that the desire of your heart is the desire of my heart," meaning from God speaking. And that was a very interesting come to Jesus, if you will, moment, because many times we think that, well, the very thing I want, surely God doesn't want for me, and we play that kind of mind game. But in fact, I was called right at that moment in that church history class on the second floor of this building at Asbury Seminary, and from there, I had to find out how and where it would take its shape, and so took through additional classes and focus and finding good return from investment of my time and energy. So it was an interesting time, and then it just kept going, so that I knew I needed to attain a doctorate somewhere, somehow, and the one I got was the most I could do at the time, and I had to fly back and forth to Boston.
Wow.
Yeah, back and forth, and it took me 10 years to do it.
Wow.
And so the family was patient, and because it required weekends and a week or two here and there, and it was a doctor of ministry program, but it was specifically in where faith intersects psychotherapy.
Okay.
And how faith can inform that. And so that's who God's called me to be, and that's who I've been. And so that's why I articulate myself as a faith-based therapist. Okay,
gotcha. And we said earlier, you've been practicing for, how long have you been, we didn't say that, how long have you been practicing now in counseling in this area?
This area, 22 years.
22 years, yeah.
And we came here in 98, and came to Wilmington, and then we just moved up here a year ago, up to Hampstead.
Okay.
And so we've just settled. This was our last move. Actually, 8 weeks ago we settled into a new home. So it's been really, really good.
Good. Well, welcome to Hampstead. Glad to have you here with us. And so as we as we continue forward, just for those listening, what we're going to talk about is a conversation that you and I have had on just parenting in the pandemic.
Yes.
And how do we come alongside our families, specifically our children, in this time? And so Dr. Gates, if you would, can you just talk to us about this? When it comes to COVID-19, how have you seen this impact children in a unique way? Make sure you get a little closer to the mic. We want to make sure everybody hears every word you're saying. You can pull it to you some, too, if that helps.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, there is this undercurrent that runs throughout people's lives right now. It sort of has gone underground of sorts, but comes out when we talk about upsets, when we talk about change, when we talk about responsibilities and the things which draw from us. And parents are having a huge load to have to create how they're going to go ahead and teach the children, do all the rhythms of life with the children, spend so much time with the children, how they're going to go ahead and try to stay connected with the rest of the family or other friends, and yet be cut off. And it's been quite a creative enterprise that people have had to come up with.
Yeah, I know for even for our family, we made some shifts just not knowing what school was going to look like. I mean, so we went from traditional public school family to being homeschooled this year. And that was just what worked out best for my kids after trying distance learning last semester and in the ways that it's impacted. So both of my kids had birthdays this summer. right?
Yes.
And so they were very different birthdays.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, my son's birthday, he had it, and my wife and I were COVID positive. So his gifts got dropped off at the sidewalk, and people were waving, and they had one of those because we couldn't come outside. It was incredibly sad, for him because we'd had this big birthday party planned and all of these things and trying to navigate that. And then you have that weight. Like, I still have to work as an adult, as a parent.
Yes.
These things must go on.
Yes.
And now, my heart breaks for the single moms. I mean, you see these single moms that are out there and the difficulty of that struggle as well. But, it's a resource you got here.
One of the things I wanted to, and I will have a list of books that I've come across. This is a brand new book in 2020, The Super Awesome, Incredible COVID-19 Birthday.
Yeah.
And how to celebrate that. And it's with two twins that celebrated their birthday. We had 2 birthdays of our grandchildren this summer, actually 3, and they, it was creative. It was not what we might have done otherwise, but it's had to be creative, and that seems to be a word that keeps coming back, and to me that I've observed lots of creativity.
For sure. So let's look at, when we see the COVID that is taking place in families and in our culture. A lot of people are looking at this as this is a trauma that families are experiencing.
Right.
This is a trauma that children are experiencing. So when we hear that word a lot, let's just go from here. How do you define trauma? Give us a good starting point definition there.
Trauma, as I've experienced it, and as I've worked with it, is an out-of-the-ordinary experience.
Okay.
And it's something which does not happen every day. It sets our own personal history apart. Normally we think of traffic accidents or tragedies. And certainly this COVID-19 has had tragedies to it.
Yeah.
But it is out of the ordinary, and it's out of step with the way life normally goes. And so therefore sets us up to have to find other coping skills in order to get through it.
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about those coping skills and talk a little bit about some of those things that we might want to create in our own families, because if trauma is a disturbance of normal outside the normal, it's a destruction of those rhythms, right? And so for us, rhythms are what gets us through, us by. I mean, you're a percussionist, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and I'm a drummer, so we understand rhythms. But what are some of those things that we can look at for families that are listening? They can go, hey, these are some of these coping mechanisms that we can put in place for our families to keep them healthy during this time.
Sure. I think that being willing to answer children's questions simply and honestly.
Okay.
Fears can grow and get out of sorts. Children have imaginations, and they have not learned yet how to necessarily scale those imaginations back. And especially when it gets dark, imaginations can grow, and they can actually begin to think they see things, feel things, and they can worry and imagine that things are going to happen and take place. So we being willing to think of the age-appropriate answer to children. The younger they are, the more concrete we must be in our explanation.
Okay.
No, we won't do that now. We'll do it tomorrow. We can't do that right now. We might try on the phone later if it's talking with family, or listening to the kids' feelings is very important. And to let them talk about, and kids are not necessarily talkers, but they might be more so when we start to play and can get into play situations.
Okay.
playing with Legos, playing even outside with our family members, throwing the ball, doing whatever, then it's important for us to hear them. There's a book here that I have called The Rabbit Listens.
The Rabbit Listens, okay.
And it will be on the bibliography that we'll have that'll attach to this. But this child had many friends, and the friends kept telling them things, and kept telling them things, and yet the rabbit listened. And that's what the child needed. And I think it makes a great point. Attending to what the child's saying with our eyes, with our physical presence, facing them. We don't communicate very well room to room. It's important to be, even side to side isn't as advantageous as face to face, eye to eye, and even with a touch. That's helpful to encourage the conversation. So that's one thing, talking about the pandemic and hearing what questions have arisen, whether it's been in school, in the neighborhood. And, kids can hear some wild tales about the way the pandemic's going to be, and we may never go back to school again, and especially if somebody's gotten sick, and what that means, and what we hope for, and we can utilize prayer in their recovery, and write notes to people who might need to have a note written and might benefit from that. It's a way to reach out. And so talking simply and honestly about their feelings, what they've heard about the pandemic is one start of how to deal with it. And then, which is very closely aligned to their feelings about it. They may cry at night. They may be sullen, be sad, be slow, be more preoccupied, look like they're not paying attention. And so rather than our calling them up to pay attention, it might be, if you notice a pattern, to maybe have a conversation one-on-one. And that's a helpful way to approach letting a child feel some confidence. And spending the one-on-one time can be very helpful. One parent, one child, and you sort of have to pick which parent and when, and it's got to have the patience to let the story unravel. So tapping into their feelings is important. As I mentioned about keeping in touch with people through notes and pictures. Some older folks right now are in nursing homes or recovery rehab places, and to get a picture is a big deal. Some go up to the window and show them the picture if they have window access, or mail it to them. And some even can have it scanned and sent to their computer if they're savvy enough, the older folks.
Well, even the idea, I was just thinking about, as you're saying this, the idea of getting your child to be part of a solution, right? So here's our problem. We're out of rhythm. We're out of sync. Things aren't the same. But what can we do? So we're going to write a letter to this person in our family. I know for us, we've been FaceTiming. We have family members that they can't come out because of their age and other conditions, and so it's like, okay, hey, tonight we're going to FaceTime with aunt and uncle, and we do that. But that has helped my kids. As hey, well, we can't do this, but here's what we can do. And that is concrete, and that is like, here's what we're going to do. Where I seem to fail as a parent is when I don't do what you're saying, when I don't give that concrete answer. When they have that question, well, what does this mean? Well, I don't know. We'll just have to see. Right? Well, that answer is not good for anybody, but it's certainly not good for a child.
Sure. And we some of us who are theologically trained get a little philosophical.
Oh, sure.
Some of us get a little winded, and we try to give too much, and it's scale it down. This is a sad thing. This is something that's upsetting. What do you think we can do? And even engage the child in the creativity.
Yeah.
I think's helpful.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like that. Here's a question, and this is gonna give everybody my age. But when I was growing up, there was two major events that I look back on as that just had a profound impact on my life. And one was the Columbine shooting on April 20th, 1999. Okay, I was in middle school, and then the second was 9/11. So both of these things that took place, I never went back to school the same way. In the first one, I went back to school on August the 21st, thinking at any moment someone could come to my school and do the same thing. Right? It was a new thought, a new shift. So on the 20th, we would pop our chip bags in the cafeteria. On the 21st, when we popped our chip bags, everybody was hitting the floor. Oh. I mean, it was this complete shift in the awareness of what was around us. And I never went back to school the same again. And schools didn't. They started operating very differently as well. Yes. And of course, 9/11, what that showed us was a lot of things. But for me, it was the death of no one can touch us in America.
Yes.
I had grown up with this idea that essentially America, we're invincible, from attack. And so even from that point, anytime we travel now, right? We think differently when we're on an airplane. The process is much different, with airplanes. So looking at all of this idea, how do you think this will change the way that our culture thinks, how our kids think from this point on? What are some of your thoughts with COVID and how it may shift thinking for the next generation?
Well, certainly it makes an impact. And when 9/11 happened, I was at the Baptist regional office because that's where the counseling center where I came to Wilmington for that position. That's where that's located. And at 9:08, the TV was on, and someone came in and said, "You should see what's going on." So right in real time, I watched it, and I said, I know this is going to change the way we do. Another one for me was Kent State shootings back in 1970. America was in a lot of chaos then, a lot of chaos. And students were taking over administration buildings and riots and all sorts of unrest. A lot of similarity to today.
Sure.
And so I'm thinking, the combination today of the unrest and the old, trying to right old wrongs, perhaps, if you will, that some of the demonstrations are trying to pull culture ahead and help culture understand what's happened, and it's combined with this total disruption of going to the beach, going to grocery stores. Now, some think this is all a hoax. If we've known anybody who's had it, I've known people who are related to clients I've had who've passed away from it. Yeah. And so this is no hoax. This is very real, and we do a pretty good job of keeping everything going. Because that's what we have to do, it seems to me, in order to be able to keep some semblance of order that we like in our lives. There's nothing wrong with that. Trying to learn some of the lessons of how do we adapt. Adapting. That seems to be one of the persistent lessons. So what do we do now? And we have a mask on and we don't like it, and what do we do with it? Do we carry it? How many of us still forget it?
Right.
When we go to the grocery store or we go out somewhere, how many do we have in our glove compartment to make sure that we have one? And we're looking to protect other people as well as protect ourselves, especially if you've had this and you have suffered through it and know that it can knock your body for a loop. So it's a very real thing, and we're hoping that as we look to the future, maybe a year from now, that maybe there'll be a vaccine and maybe there'll be a way that we can return to some of the way we did things. But
Mm-hmm.
all the hands washing, all of that takes place now, so much more rigorous, and so it's just that shift of routine itself.
Yeah.
It's I think it'll endure. That will continue to endure.
Yeah, I think, when we touched on this a little bit earlier, but one of the things that I know that I'm trying to help my own kids navigate is continuing to trust God, even though things are different today, right? And so it was pretty easy to trust God when you were going to school and school was in session and it was working and everything was just going fine, right? But continuing on in our faith, to count it all joy when you face trials of various kinds. I mean, that's a hard thing for an adult to grasp the concept of.
Yes.
But then how do we as parents help our children in that area? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, and it's converting the tragedy into an opportunity to serve. It's converting that vulnerable feeling we have about ourselves, about routine and ordinary life, into an expectation that we root our faith deeper, find God and pray and meet together as God's people. That's those are some other ways to advance that sense of finding God's Spirit in the midst of all of this. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question, because we talked about this a little bit last time as we were getting ready for this today, but why is it important for a parent to be plugged in with a church or faith community during a time such as this? Why is that something that, if you're listening and maybe you're not plugged into a church, why is it important to be plugged in with a community of faith right now?
To me, it's a context. We choose our contexts. We live in a neighborhood. We live in a town, a community. We watch certain programs. We read certain books, and those all help define who we are in our context. And the faith community is not pretense that I'm so much better because I have this faith community. I think I know I need to be centered, well-centered, and tuned into God, who can assist me, who can nudge me, who can urge me to move down the road, and I can find grace and forgiveness. Those are some of the aspects, because we're not going to get it all right.
Yeah.
That's a fact. And to have the grace to find forgiveness and to have the ability to move on and to find that God's at our side and God's with us. It's not presumption, but it's promise. It's not that God is a lucky rabbit's foot that we pull out of our pocket and rub it and it's all ours and we determine it. No, it's companionship. It's God's faithfulness and durability with us. Sometimes we watch the news, and the news on television can light us up. Because anything visual, whether TV or movies, have by necessity, they communicate emotion and deep emotion. I told you the other day that I read my news.
Yeah.
Because it helps me sort out what I want to know, and then as I make decisions about it, then it helps me to look at things, to find facts as I can. And I think that's an important screen time, social media, TV, 24-hour news. News that's on all the time is not news. It's old.
Right. Yeah.
24-hour news is not news.
Yeah.
It's contrived. It's reformulated, and so that's why I caution against. There are people who sit with a particular, their own choice of a TV channel and sit with it all their waking hours of the day, and default other things they could be doing with their lives, and it brings agitation, aggravation, and I think it's overexposure. And so, all that to say that I think it's important if we can help define our context. If it's very challenging now to be in a community of faith. We have a small group that we do meet, and we're meeting outside this evening, and it we're keeping distance and all of that to preserve all of our health. But it's a continuation of what we met last year, and it was really good for us, and we found how important it was to get back together. Because we found great fellowship, great friendship, and we're part of that group, the boisterous group that when Jordan mentioned on Sunday morning that we several spoke up and caused a little commotion in the congregation. That was fun. So we know where your small group is. They make themselves known. And that's when you look at it, I've talked a lot to teenagers about input and output, right? And so the things that I'm allowing into my life are going to have a direct impact on what comes out of my life. So whether that's my speech, my thought, what I do, and for a family to be plugged into a faith community at any time is great, but even in a time of distress and struggle and hardship, how much better is that? Because the input, as you said, if you're watching the news all day, that is constant input. That is, it frustrates the soul. And I've been thinking about what you said, because I can tend to, if I'm not careful, be a news junkie. But you said you read all of your news, and one of the things I was like, there's a lot to that, because if you're watching the news, most of what you're seeing. Say you watch a clip that's talking about the COVID-19 vaccine. 90% of what you're watching is a stock media footage that I can go purchase right now online. Like, I've seen these, like, oh, you got that from this website because I saw it when I was on the air. That's not the actual lab that they even worked in. You add the music behind it, the quick changing, and then a very serious commentator that says, maybe it'll kill you. Like, and then rather than reading, and finding multiple sources to read it, what you've done is you've separated yourself from the hype of it all. And it's changed a lot of your input versus output. And one of the things that I've experienced as a family pastor is, more than I can count how many parents I've talked to that have seemed to have gotten themselves wrapped up between social media and news media, a sensationalism, and they're like, I don't even know what to do next. It's this stuck, a vortex, if you will. Yes, and it's difficult to sort out what's real and what is captured my emotions. And not that emotions are bad or wrong, but sometimes they can be misleading because they ascend and take us to the forever and beyond.
One of the things too, and as a parent, we have to also just be so careful as to what our kids are hearing. I grew up saying that song was that, oh, be careful, little ears, what you hear. But there is a truth to that. So one of the things that Tanya and I decided early on, as much as I love the news is never on in our house when our kids are there. So we never have it on TV because I have no control over that content, right? So the newscaster comes up and he's talking about rape and murder and this and that. And I grew up in a house where the news was always on, and I never thought about that, but it was like, I was listening to those things. My parents did a phenomenal job of making sure what I saw was good, but kind of the news was the one that they maybe forgot about. And the one that we forget about because, we're just getting updated on what's going on in the world. But there's so much of that, I think, that can even stir in a child that fear that we talked about earlier.
Yes, it suggests that there's a context that we live in that's far more dangerous than it truly is. Are there bad things that happen? Absolutely. To the degree and to the extent that news would suggest, no. Actuarially, no. It doesn't happen that often. when it does, and it happens to us, it's bad, and we certainly acknowledge that. But to live in fear and to, I don't think is helpful, and I don't think that's the context that we need to promote.
One of the things that I saw in one of my kids was we got talking about, we have some friends that are missionaries to Haiti, and in the conversation, the Haiti earthquake came up, and my daughter's extraordinarily perceptive. She's 9 years old, and so she won't just ask one question. It's going to be a series of questions followed up by more series of questions. But for her, it was, well, how long? Her question was this: how long was the earthquake, and how many people died?
Oh yeah.
And I mean, she wanted to know. And then you look at the tens of thousands that died over a earthquake, I think, that lasted less than 10 seconds.
Yes.
So what was the questions for the next week was, Daddy, is there ever going to be an earthquake here where we live?
Yes.
And then it's navigating, because that question wasn't going away. It was a piece of information she received, and there was just so many of those questions that came after that.
And she needed a context to put it in. And that's what we do with the information. We're storing it, we're putting it in its appropriate place, but we have a lot of work to do as parents to put it in a context that's fair, that's reasonable, so that kids know what to do with that, we're not living on the edge. When I was growing up, we were living on the edge of the atom bomb being dropped.
So you had drills in school,
yes.
right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we got under our desks as if that was going to help.
Put your head between your knees and kiss your butt goodbye, right? I mean, that was about the extent of it. Yeah, get under your desk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, so we do want the kids to be prepared.
Yeah.
But to do it with a context that they can do something about, too. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's so true. I think even for any parent listening to know that, hey, when I'm plugged into a faith community, there are people that are aligned with my family that are going to give context to this. Where is God in this? And help navigate some of those they're difficult conversations to have, but so necessary to have. And I think one of the things we realized, we're into March, and then we realized we're going from probably one of our biggest moments in our church, to, hey, we're not meeting next week. And it for us, I remember grabbing our family ministry team, and I'm like, we have to continue to reach our kids. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. So we went into my garage, and I pulled everything out of the garage. I hung camo netting up, and I hung a kayak that I had, and I said, I got Jackie, our children's director, and got her, our Camp Renovate director, I got her in costume, and I said, here's our script. We're going to shoot it right here out of my garage. And we edited, I think Saturday night, we were editing up past midnight, trying to put this content together, because I wanted our kids to know that the church was still there, God still had something for them that next day. They weren't going to go to church, but here's what God is doing. And so for our preschool and our elementary groups, we still had that next Sunday. They woke up, they watched it on YouTube. It was different, but it was still something that was for them. And it was concrete.
Yes,
it was their concrete, so to speak, on the television, and then they could see it and participate. Yes.
And even now, if you're listening and you're still not ready to come back to church, all that content is still online, and we're still creating it and putting it online, even though we're meeting together. So if you go to YouTube and type in Camp Renovate TV, you'll find all of our elementary stuff. And if you go to Reno City TV, you'll find all of our birth, preschool, 1s, 2s, and it's the great thing about it, as you said earlier from the beginning, creativity has been a big part of helping us through this, and even as a ministry team, we've really had to sharpen creativity and just really get down to learning new things, trying new things, and so we've enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work as well.
The work has shown that you put the work in, and that's the one thing I have noticed, that the creativity that's come out with in the various ways people have done. We made blackberry and blueberry jelly early on, and then tried to do some things with peaches, and just as a way of doing something different. That's that's been one hallmark, I think, of this. And I'm not talking about a Pinterest type people who do this, who do creativity in extraordinary ways, but I'm talking about ordinary creativity. And that's what this is required.
Yeah.
It's required us to step up that way and do something we might not normally do. But I've been real surprised and interested, and even hear that some of the kids, listening to some of the children, how things they have done to participate that way.
Yeah, that's been really, really good. So let's just walk through just a few things. I had this question as a parent, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some behaviors or conversations that I want to be on the lookout for my kids right now?
Right. Sometimes kids act out, they strike out, or they drop out. Any difference in their routines are important. And I'm talking about I'm talking about a average family. Kids will teach you what you need to know about them. And so it may be different. It will likely be different from house to house to house. And to let them demonstrate how this is affecting them, they're not so verbal as we ask the direct question, but it's to discern, and praying for discernment is a good thing.
Yeah.
To discern what the actual what changes there might be going on with them. And then it's interesting that if we reflect with them, they may acknowledge that. And so specifically, kids get quiet. Kids will take up with other kids. I think it's interesting if we can listen in on kids' conversations with other kids. When my daughter, who's now 32, when she learned to drive, I got laid off as the chief transportation officer in our house. And so I didn't get to listen to the conversations that I had before, and to listen as she talked with friends. And that's what they do. They feel that comfort and go ahead and talk and chat. And so we can kind of listen in and that way. And when kids are playing with other children, their siblings or neighbor kids, being purposeful to listen in and to see what's the event. And I don't think I've actually noticed an upswing, excuse me, in hurt kids hurting each other, or I don't know. I think it's idiosyncratic to see how kids are going to respond to this.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when you said earlier, you're talking about at nighttime.
Yes.
Is when those are my kids. That's my kids.
Yeah.
At nighttime is when contemplation of things starts to take place. And that's where questions come out, and that being present part is really important. And one of the things I would encourage families to do, and I've said this before, that mom and dad be engaged in the bedtime process.
Yes.
I mean, it's simple for bedtime to be kind of mom's thing, got the kids or one or the other.
Sure.
But having, if you're in a home where you're blessed, where mom and dad are there regularly, having both parents a part of that time, because there is so much of that contemplation that takes place in a kid. It seems to be at night.
Yes.
You can be there to answer those questions, or to encourage, or to pray over your kids, and just how important it is for a child to hear their father, their mother pray over them.
Yes.
And what that does for them as well. So,
and there can be there's the American Pediatric Academy suggested the brush, book, and bed. 3 B's on part of a routine. And of course, I think we would add prayer, praying with the kids and letting them articulate prayer concerns they have. That's a good way to let them bring that out and put it where parents can hear it, and they can even hear it themselves.
Yeah, I noticed that last night. my son still prays for people with COVID.
Oh.
You know, so it's been a continual thing, but every night, he says, you know, God, please be with the people that have COVID and heal them. I mean, it's just,
Yes.
so for what that tells me is that he's going through his day and that's a thought on his mind.
Yes.
Right. It's a reoccurring thought that I, as a parent, can know and kind of get the inside scoop just by listening to my child pray what's important to them and the dog, right? Yes, of course. It's COVID and God, thank you for Rocky, you know, the dog, but yeah.
Well, and it touched his life, obviously. It touched your home. And so that's a real thing.
Yeah.
And so he's bringing that real thing that could be lurking. It's there. It was there. It had a presence. And so I'm going to ask God to hear me and help others. Yeah.
Yeah, and the friends and friends thing. I mean, I know there's a lot of parents with teenagers right now, and this is a concerning time to have a teenager.
Yes.
I mean, we you know, very, very high suicide rates in teenagers before this even happened.
Sure.
You can go and you can look up the numbers from the CDC of what's happened over the last 10 years in teen suicides, and it's heartbreaking. And then you have another moment now of isolation in teenagers, but parents being engaged in talking with their teenagers during this time is incredibly important, but probably more so just listening, like you said.
That's it, listening with the teenagers.
Yeah.
If they start to talk, oh boy, sit down. I don't care what's on the stove. It is important to spend the time face to face and be engaged in it.
Yeah,
because that's precious. That's not something one can, as a parent, can make happen. It's being spontaneous with the moment.
And as a parent, usually if you have the parent of a teenager, they don't. If you're trying to force that conversation, it's like, let me just check the box here, Mom. You know, like what do you want to hear if you get that? You know, but well, good. Well. Before we wrap up, here's another question that I have for you, and if there's anything you'd like to share, please do. But any reading, parent resource recommendations, anything that you have for us? I know you mentioned a couple of them already,
right.
But we're going to have these linked there in the podcast for people as well. But
5 of the, or 6 or 7 of these books are brand new this year, 2020.
Okay.
Only one of them is actually last year, so that's what makes them so the topics jump right off the page, and I actually have them grandchildren approved.
Grandchildren.
I did run them by my granddaughter who reads, and she told me, Poppy, those are very good books you got.
There we go. Grandchild approved books.
Right. That's right.
Perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So, well, great. Well, we're going to put those up on the links in the show notes. You can find those there. And well, I guess that kind of wraps up our time for us today. Dr. Gates, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for jumping in and being a part of the RenoFam podcast. We'll catch you next time.